What does a good offseason look like for the Chicago Cubs? And I'm not just talking about the players that they get.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We are your team every day. I'm Sam Olbert. I'm a lifelong fan, taking my passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Fun show for you today on this Friday. We got best and worst. We've got how the Cubs can get to where we want to go. What players can they get? How can they get to where they want to go? But the first segment is, where do the Cubs want to go? And what does a successful offseason look like in terms of the end result, right? So before we talk about players, that's what we're going to talk about in the second segment. I want to talk about where the Cubs need to finish this offseason in terms of where they stack up against the rest of the league and the rest of the NL Central. And then we could talk about how they get there players-wise, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is, I'll just come out right now and say it. My concern about this offseason is that the Cubs go get a good pitcher, whether that's via trade or via free agency. They go get some sort of bench bat, and then they fill in their team with the rest of their holes with their relievers. The over-under the day before opening day for the Cubs is at like 84.5 or 85.5, right around where Milwaukee will be, right around where Cincinnati will be, and we'll all go into the 26 season with all the experts saying the NL Central is a 3-team race or a 2-team race. That's a failure if that's the case. A failure. Where I believe, I'm just going to answer the question right now. What does a good offseason look like for the Cubs? Forget players for a second. It looks like by opening day, they are the clear-cut NL Central favorites, okay? And I'll give them some credit. They did that last season. It didn't work out. The Brewers performed at a level that nobody would expect to. The Cubs won 92 games. But going to get Kyle Tucker, even though you can make the case they should have added more pitching, they could have done a lot more. They didn't spend the Bellinger money. At least going out and getting Kyle Tucker, in my opinion, made the Cubs the favorites. And I don't want to get too technical with the gambling part of it, but I think they should be minus favorites on opening day. And I believe they were last year, like minus 115, minus 120. And whoever's behind them is, 3-1 or 2.5-1, whatever it is. Clear-cut NL Central favorites. That's what this offseason should accomplish. But here's what we're looking at right now, okay? Last year, you went out and got a guy like Kyle Tucker. It felt like the missing piece. We've sat there, we've debated almost – to a point, well, is he worth it or is he not? Whatever. But you still got that guy, and that gave you credibility. It gave you a really good chance that he performed the first half of the season and everything was great. You're now basically guaranteed to lose that guy, and there is absolutely no insinuation around the league that you are trying to replace him externally with a player of that caliber. You are pitching the fact that you're going to replace him internally with Ballesteros and Casey, which we'll talk about in the second segment. But for this part of it, I just want to say this. You could sit here and pitch me and tell me that that's the right thing for the organization. But in the back of my mind, and this is me coming to you as a fan as much as a podcaster, I also know it's the best thing for the organization financially to save money. And that bothers me. And I think there's a big market path to build this offseason and make yourself the clear favorite, which is, of course, the easiest way. You just go get stars and go get good players. And then there's the mid-market way. And the mid-market way is, we're going to go get a guy here as a starter. We're going to get a guy there. And then we're going to build internally. And if that works, great. If that works, great. I'll be the first one to say great job. But I still can't overlook the fact that it's also best for the baseball budget. And that just bothers me because the division, it shouldn't be a really close race outside of the fact that the Brewers are so great at developing players. You should be able to go spend enough money, not just to be in the race, not just to be an 85, 86 win team, but a team that is the clear favorite. Now, if it doesn't work out that way, that's fine. But the purpose of this episode is what looks like a good offseason. On opening day, the Cubs are clear-cut favorites. And I don't think that's going to happen. And it's not going to happen because of the money situation. And look, I'll just say this. I was listening to Max Kellerman and Bill Simmons on the Bill Simmons podcast on Wednesday. And Max Kellerman's a diehard Yankees fan. And he was talking about how Hal Steinbrenner, came out and said, they're, trying to break even, whatever the quote was. I don't remember what it was. And he made a really interesting point. And he said that in today's age, Hal Steinbrenner, and I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing, he's worth like $2.5 billion. And believe it or not, that's actually not enough to run the Yankees the way Max Kellerman wants the Yankees to be run. And, Tom Ricketts, I think, is worth about 3, whatever it is. And you feel the same way. Like if you can't go out and get the guys that you need to be clear NL Central favorites, nobody is asking you to be the Dodgers. That's not realistic. That's not fair. That's not possible. I'm not even asking you to be one of the main favorites in the National League. I'm just asking on paper to be the clear favorites in the NL Central versus a small market team like the Brewers and a small market team like the Cincinnati Reds, who, as of recording time right now, have real interest in Kyle Schwarber. If you let that happen, that's when you have to start, looking at things a little bit deeper and reevaluating things. But I think going into this CBA, there's so much unknown. Why do we have to treat the unknown as, oh, we got to save money or do this and that? Go take this division and build off your 92 win season. And spend some money and act like a big market team and get yourself to the point where it's like, hey, it's the Cubs division to lose. I'd be really surprised if they lost it. And if the Brewers have another 97 win year, then there's nothing you could do. Bravo to them. But there's a clear path this offseason to make a statement in the division or even in the league. And to me, that's the goal. And I just don't think you could sell fans on, hey, you lose a guy like Kyle Tucker, who you traded the farm for. You're not going to re-sign him. If you want to say, hey, and again, it all goes back to the two things that are true part of this perspective that's so difficult. I wouldn't give Kyle Tucker $300+ million. I don't think he's worth that. But it also doesn't excuse the Cubs for not replacing him or spending money elsewhere. When the Cubs got Matthew Boyd, it's a great acquisition. I was a huge fan of it at the time. But you also know that they're going that route because they don't want to go after the big fish because of finances. You always have to acknowledge both sides. And I just think I'm getting tired of it. And I think this offseason, more than any other one, would really emphasize how much the Cubs are trying to save money if they just don't go out and say, hey, the NL Central is ours. We're not going to let Cincinnati go get the guy that we non-tendered, that became the best guy out of the core by far, that now could go right across the road and cost us a playoff spot. There needs to be emphasis. I know we talked about Marquee. I know we talked about the Cubs losing money. They have to put out a product and take some risks and show these fans that the 92-win season was not an exception of the rule, but the expectation. Because right now, they are not close to a 90-win roster. And I believe going to get one starting pitcher doesn't do that either. Now, they may overperform to get to be a 90-win roster. That's not enough. This needs to be a 90-win roster on paper, opening day, over under on FanDuel in the 87 to 89.5 range, because they're always going to be a little bit conservative with their projections. At least 2-3 wins ahead of any team in the Central and a minus favorite. They need to do that. And if Tom Ricketts and Jed Hoyer can't do that, then find somebody who will, because the fans, especially going into a weird year in 27, they deserve a team that isn't middling and going the mid-market way. So the big question is how can the Cubs do that? So coming up next, we're going to talk about the big market path of going out and taking this division. It's easy. We'll take 2 minutes, and then we'll talk about the path the Cubs probably are going to go, which is frustrating, but still, what's the mid-market path to still be the favorites clearly in this division? We talk about all those scenarios coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets located within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Thank you for making Locked On Cubs your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Okay, so we have the goal now. The goal to me is to be clear favorites in the NL Central over the Milwaukee Brewers. All right. With that being said, how do we get that done? Well, there's the big market way and there's the mid-market way. And, the way I would describe the difference between the two, just in terms of how it would look is, to use one of my boxing analogies, if you were let's say a pretty good heavyweight boxer and you were to get in the ring with Floyd Mayweather, right? A welterweight, one of the all-time greats, but a welterweight, right? Would you want to try and outbox him, out-tactic him, outthink him, and see if you could out-counterpunch him? Or would you just use your weight, your size, and your strength to overwhelm him, because that's why there's weight classes in boxing? The way I would relate that is take weight classes to salary, to market. That's what the Cubs and Brewers are. The Brewers are like a Mayweather or like a very intelligent, welterweight or whatever weight boxer, right? They're very shrewd. They're very smart. They get every bang for their buck. You don't want to play that game with them. And that's not to say it's not important. You want to be good on the margins. We've talked about that for years on the show, but that's not what you're best at. What you're best at is being the Chicago Cubs and using your market, using your status, using your fans to be able to generate more revenue, more interest than a team like the Brewers, which should result in getting higher priced, more talented, better players in free agency than the Brewers. And if it doesn't, then that's when ownership has to look in the mirror. And I understand that the Cubs have spent $90 million more than the Brewers, or $85 million. I get it. It should be more than that. Okay. So the big market path for me, and I'm going to be realistic. I'm not sitting here saying go be the Dodgers or, get every single great player out there. To me, the big market plan here would be simple. Go sign either Michael King or Amai. The Cubs have had interest in both of them. And I think Michael King's probably the more likely at this time, but go sign either one of those, no trade, and then go get another big-time bat. Sahadev Sharma reported, John Heyman reported. As of Thursday, the Cubs do have interest in Alex Bregman. They're on the list. Are they the favorites? We don't know. But go at another bat. I would prefer Bichette or Schwarber. I've made that very clear. It doesn't seem like that's realistic, so I'm going to drop it. You guys know how I feel, but I'm going to drop it. So let's say they go the Bregman route. That's good enough. If you sign Bregman, so at least you have another good, solid bat coming in as Tucker goes out, and then you sign a guy like Michael King. Let's just hypothetically say that. It feels like it's either that or Amai from the free agency pool. And then you fill out the rest of your team with bullpen signings, maybe a couple other utility, guys, whatever, maybe a bigger bullpen signing. You're sitting there at $245, $250 million on opening day over the CBT. I'm good with that. And you have that mix with the young guys, because in this scenario, you hold on to Ballesteros. In this scenario, you hold on to Owen Casey. And then you have the flexibility with those guys to, play them. You don't have to put as much pressure on them. Same with Matt Shaw. You also have the ability, if you're on a 100-win pace or 95-win pace at the deadline, you want to run away with this division and go for a championship run, maybe you move them at the deadline. That's the big market way of doing it. The mid-market way of doing it would be maybe you sign Michael King, maybe you trade for a pitcher, one of those two things. You don't do anything significantly offensively, and you roll out the red carpet for all the young guys, and you hope that they succeed. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm okay with the two timeline situation, meaning you want to develop young players right now and win right now at the same time. But I think when you're the Chicago Cubs, you should have the luxury of being able to do both, where you can be a 95-plus win team and have Moises Ballesteros hit 195, or have Owen Casey be a non-factor or something like that. And last year's a great example of it. Right? They did it last year. They had Tucker. Now, Pete overperformed. Matt Shaw really struggled for a long time, but it didn't ruin their season because they were built to be a really good team and they got some overperformance. But I just think the mid-market way of doing this is to just hope that Pete Crow-Armstrong can repeat what he did last year, hope that Michael Busch is legit, hope that Matt Shaw takes a big step forward, hope that one of Ballesteros or Casey can stick in the lineup every day. And that's just a lot of hope. That's just a lot of hope. Whereas if you add a guy like Bregman to that, I know it's like, Sam, come on, is it really just one move? It just takes the pressure off everybody else a little bit. Now Shaw can become a utility guy or a piece in a trade. Now Ballesteros, sure, maybe he's the everyday DH. He earns that job, but the lineup's not really centered around him. He doesn't have to be great. Casey gets an opportunity. Whatever it is, if you want to load up on pitching, I'll be honest with you, I still think even if they add Bregman, the offense still just has a lot of holes because I'm a little bit more, what's the word? A little bit more concerned about the repetition from to 26 from 25 for some of these guys, mainly Pete. Honestly, mainly Pete. I think Pete's the big one because as much as we talk about Tucker when he started to struggle, the offense started to struggle. Pete really, his offensive numbers fell off a cliff in the second half. And the amount of variance that he gave, if you get first half Pete, this team's going to be really, really good regardless of what they do in free agency. If you get second half Pete, this team might struggle regardless of what they do in free agency. I mean, that's how big of the difference it was. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle. It always is. And that's why adding a guy like Bregman would be great. But the reports are the Cubs do have interest in Bregman. I'm for it because I just want to add another bat to take the pressure off these young guys. Sign one of these pitchers, whoever it is. We've talked extensively about King. We've talked about Amai. I gotta, now that the Cubs seem a little bit more serious about Amai, I got to do like my second or third deep dive and really dig in to it. It seems like he's definitely the higher upside selection there, although Michael King at his best had a really high ceiling as well. But really the difference between going big market and mid market is how much you are relying on outperforming expectations. How much are you relying on that? Every team relies on it a little bit, but in the mid market scenario, without adding really a big bat, you're just putting a lot of pressure on guys who are unproven. Matt Shaw, unproven. Moises Ballesteros, unproven. Owen Casey, unproven. And as amazing as Pete was, I don't think there's a bigger fan of Pete on this planet than me. You can't go into 26 and go, that's going to be a 30-30 guy. You just can't do that. I think Michael Busch's numbers are the most interesting because he had such a big year and Wrigley was so unfriendly that I'm not even going to, out of respect to him, because I think I haven't shown him the respect that he's deserved on this show. I haven't done a good enough job of that. Out of respect to him, I'm not even going to put him in the can he repeat or not. I think when you look at the underlying stats, he's earned that respect that I expect him to be an 800-plus OPS guy. I expect him to be a 30-plus home run guy next year. He's earned that. But the other young guys, it's just there's just a lot of questions. And I think if you go the big market route, you can really make things easier on yourself. And it goes back to the first segment. Bregman at third, Dansby at short, Nico at second, Bush at first, Kelly Amaya at catching, Ballesteros DH, Seiya in right, Pete in center, Ian in left. Pitchers of just the hypothetically, let's go the King route. King, Horton, Boyd, Steele, Shota, Tyone, rebuilding the bullpen. I think on paper that's the favorite in the NL Central, and I'd be good running out there with those guys. I'd be good going to battle with those guys. It really comes down to just that offensive ad that I think that could put them over the top. And listen, Milwaukee's a great organization. If you go out next year and you win 92 again and they win 97 again, is there something that you need to look inwards with Jed and the developmental stuff on why you can't catch them? Yes. But is it also kind of like, hey, back-to-back 90-plus win seasons? I'm not asking you to win 100. I'm not asking you to repeat as champs as the Dodgers. I'm just asking you to be a 90-plus win team in that realm each year, which I think, especially going into this year with the Peralta situation, should be good enough to at least be favorites on paper in the division. And then we let the season play out as it will. Coming up next, we're going to talk about some really fun stories, some really not fun stories, best and worst of the week. We do that next. This episode is brought to you by a FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Folks, the Chicago Bears go to Lambeau Field on Sunday afternoon, and probably the biggest game that they've played in since the double doink Parkey game against the Eagles in the playoffs. It doesn't get any more exciting than this. I'm not a huge fan that the line is at 6.5. I think it opened at 6 and went down to 5.5, now up to 6.5, maybe some sharp action on Green Bay. This team deserves respect. We'll see what happens. It's not the end of the world if they don't win the game, but everybody's going to be watching, and I can't wait. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right. Shout out to the everydayers, and you can become a Locked On Cubs everydayer by joining us for every episode throughout the week. And if you are an everydayer and you have been for a while, you know that on solo shows on a Friday, I like to do my best and my worst of the week. I'll go 2 bests and 1 worst. One of them is what I just read for the FanDuel ad. The best of the week, just the Bears. The Bears actually being in first place in the NFC in December. I know this isn't a Bears show, so I won't go too long on it. I've doubted this team. I'll hand up. I really doubted them. And I still am not sure Super Bowl wise or whatever, but you got to live in the present moment. And what they've done has just been extraordinary. And they've earned the right, as I always talk about with the Cubs, they've earned the right to have a special moment against their rivals up north on Sunday. Hopefully they have better luck than our Cubbies did when they faced the Brewers there in the postseason. My other best of the week, this one's probably going to be an eye roller, but especially after I just did this whole episode on ownership and stuff, but I am encouraged. Sahadev Sharma, Patrick Mooney, Northside Territory, really good podcast, really informative. They were talking about the Cubs being in on Cease, and I know everyone's like, well, we're really tired of everybody of the Cubs being in on guys and not getting them. But like, if they are willing to spend 3 digits, if they are spending 9 figures on a pitcher, like they're going to get one of the good ones, and they haven't spent that type of money on a pitcher since Yu Darvish, right? And so that should be good enough to land somebody that they want, whether it's King, whether it's I'll be honest. I mean, I've said it on the show. I really thought that they were going to get priced out of the starting pitcher market, end up probably trading for a big arm. And it sounds like they're really in that race. And that is exciting to me. And as I just said the last segment, if they could pair that with a guy like Bregman or one of the other bigger free agent bats to round up this team, with their bullpen, I would feel pretty good going into the year. I'm not asking the Cubs to spend $290, $300+ million. I'm just asking them to go over the CBT at 245, 250. I don't think that's crazy. And the fact that the Cubs at least are in on those guys, it's at least an encouraging sign that the budget's a little bigger. It's an encouraging sign that the Bregman story came out. I didn't do a direct story covering that yet. Maybe Matt and I will do that for Monday if there's no action, because, the Cubs are in on Bregman. Okay, let's see what happens. That's really the story. They were in on him last year as well, but it's exciting to me that they're at least entertaining that, because I really did have some concerns that they wouldn't be entertaining anything but, one pitcher at an exact price that they like and then rounding out on the margins. So good sign that the Cubs are interested in Bregman. Good sign that they would spend nine figures. I keep saying three digits. It's ridiculous. 9 figures on a starting pitcher. Now let's see it in action. Okay. Now let's see it in action on paper. My worst of the week has been discussed already on this program, and Matt and Joe discussed it yesterday. But the Kyle Schwarber, the Red stuff, I just want to give my full take on that. It was my worst of the week when Matt sent it to me, and then I heard about it. You non-tendered Kyle Schwarber for financial reasons. It turned out to be an unmitigated disaster. If I remember correctly, on Cap's podcast, Jed Hoyer joined Cap and said that was one of his bigger regrets, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. If I am, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure he did that. And then I think there was like some Verlander old stuff he talked about, but the Schwarber thing was definitely on there. And if that was the case, and you regret that, that's why I've pounded the table. I know it might not make the most perfect baseball sense, but who cares? Sometimes, I get it. The goal is to win. But it's not like this team has this unbelievable track record of winning all the time. The second goal after winning is to please fans and to keep fans happy and to put out a product that your fans are proud of and want to pay for. And so, I just think bringing Schwarber back is such the perfect ending and the perfect fix-it for this, even though it might not make baseball sense. That's not going to happen. So like I said, I'll move on from that. But to have him potentially go to the Reds, which in my opinion would make the Reds serious NL Central contenders. Last year, I never viewed them as that. Matt can attest to that because we talked about it off the air. I was solely concerned about the Brewers. I really wasn't worried about the Cardinals a lot for a while either, until they rattled off a bunch of wins and then they faded. But the Reds just never had my attention because their offense was so mediocre at best. If you have Gavin Lux hitting cleanup, you are not a division contender. You put Kyle Schwarber in Cincinnati for a reunion and going up against the Cubs 13 times a year with his pedigree. I mean, when's the last time Kyle Schwarber's been on a really bad team? The Nationals. I mean, this guy's a winner. I mean, Tim talked about that on our show. He goes to Cincinnati. It would be really, it would ruin my offseason. Even if the Cubs got Bregman and got King and added a really good another 8th, 9th inning guy, it would still ruin my offseason if Kyle Schwarber put on a Cincinnati Red uniform. That's how serious I feel about that. It would be, it's like, okay, Jed, I get it. You made a mistake. Mistake happens. Mistakes happen. Now the mistake just keeps revealing and getting worse and unraveling and unraveling. I want to be done with that already. You non-tendered the best guy of the core. Rizzo, in terms of the future, Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, Contreras, Schwarber, who's had the best career. And now he's going to go to Cincinnati. Contreras going to the Cardinals, that was a different thing. I with all due respect, I don't fear Wilson Contreras at all. I fear Kyle Schwarber. Absolutely fear Kyle Schwarber. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the pod. Just wanted to basically emphasize how important it is this offseason, because we sit here, we talk about all these names, but sometimes I think it's good to step back a second and go, okay, with all these names, what are we trying to accomplish going into opening day? And I firmly believe, forget winning a World Series right now. Obviously, that's the big goal. You got to get there first in baseball. I want to win the National League Central. I am tired. It's been since 2017, not counting the COVID year. I'm tired of losing to the Milwaukee Brewers. It's time to win that Central, be the clear favorites, and dominate that division wire to wire. I'm Sam Olber. This is Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend, everybody.